Good afternoon. My name is John Estes. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's kind of developed a life of its own in American pop culture, and that is the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit. It's a very interesting case. It's interesting that it's become kind of the poster child for frivolous litigation, where when if you look at the facts of the case, it's really the kind of thing that Americans generally could find themselves really getting on board with. You've got McDonald's, they're massive, trying to keep the small person down. When you look at McDonald's, today they're operating something like 36,000 stores in over 100 countries. They probably have one on Antarctica by now, I'm not really sure. But even in 1992, they're huge. They're reporting net income over $900 million this year. That year. That's at a margin well over 20%. Their experts are forecasting growth, I think upwards close to 20% the years coming after that. Clearly, they were right. On the other hand, you've got Stella Liebeck. She's your average all American grandmother. She's in her late 70s. Her grandson very kindly takes his grandmother to get a cup of coffee. They get the coffee through the drive-through. They stop the car. When she goes to add her creamer and her sugar to it, kind of fumbles with the lid, spills coffee all over her midsection. She's wearing sweatpants that kind of compress to her body. And she ends up with third-degree burns. I think she spent a few nights in the hospital. She had to have surgery, skin grafts. It's very painful, not to mention the medical costs. And she's very reasonable. She simply just asks that McDonald's kind of cover her medical bills. And they kind of laugh her off. They try to push her away. They offer her $800, which isn't going to make her whole at all. So she's smart. She goes and finds an attorney, and she kind of looks out. She finds an attorney who previously, in 1986, had already sued and won against McDonald's due to hot coffee. It's an interesting case. It's kind of the facts are different. It's the burns aren't as bad. The settlement was small, five figures. But what happened in that case is the head of quality assurance for McDonald's testifies that they know that their coffee's hot, they know that it's burning customers, and they have no intention on turning the heat down, uh, which is interesting. So to start with, the heat of McDonald's coffee is way hotter than your average cup of coffee. If we were to go to Waffle House, IHOP, pretty much anywhere, and order a cup of coffee, we could expect to get a cup somewhere below 150 degrees, hot enough to scald, hot enough to drink though. Not hot enough to cause third degree burns in a matter of seconds. McDonald's serves their coffee closer to 190 degrees, and that is hot enough to leave third degree burns. And what makes this very important is that coffee is a fairly standardized product. The reasonable consumer, when they purchase a cup of coffee, is going to assume that it's as hot as every other cup of coffee they've had, and they need to be careful with it. They don't realize when they purchase a cup of coffee from McDonald's that, wow, this is like close to 25% hotter, and I can really burn myself on this. That makes the product unreasonably dangerous. And that's really what Liebeck kind of leans into in her main arguments. The first argument was essentially the strict product liability, which McDonald's has already opened itself to up to through their last case. Um, and they don't have much of a defense against this. Secondly, they're arguing that even if they can defend the product liability, they weren't warned to the dangers of how hot it is. There may have been a caution very hot kind of comical warning sitting on the coffee, but there's nothing to tell you that you can give yourself third degree burns with it. No warning at all. And they argued, third, that McDonald's was acting with a conscious indifference to the safety of its customers, which they really were. Since the 1986 lawsuit, they hadn't changed anything. The coffee is just as hot. It was burning kids between the time. They knew it was hot enough to cause third degree burns, and they took no measures to amend that. McDonald's is really painted so far into the corner here that they don't have much of a defense that they can muster. They come up with a misuse of the product, which it's kind of a lame duck. It's a non-starter. They claim that they never intended the customer to place the product in their lap. Well, they're in the business of drive-throughs. They can safely assume that customers are going to be consuming their product from a car. My first vehicle would have been very much state of the art by 1992 standards, and there wasn't a cup holder you could mix coffee with. You had to put it on the center console or put it in your lap. That was pretty much standard operating procedure at the time, and the court just shot that down. They come back initially in McDonald's favor. This is where you get the $2.7 million from. They award Liebeck $2.7 million in damages. That's the number that everybody plasters around. But when you break that number down, it's very interesting because it represents less than 2 mornings coffee, simply coffee revenues for the restaurant. Which kind of goes back into how strict product liability works. And part of the reason that we have that in our laws is that manufacturers can generally bear this cost more than the customer can. Miss Liebeck probably had a hard time with her medical bills, but for McDonald's, at worst, they're getting hit for less than 2 mornings coffee revenue to cover it. And then, as the case goes forward, they admit a little bit of fault on Liebeck's side by placing the coffee in her lap. The settlement had already been lowered. They agreed that she was 20% at fault for that. They lowered the settlement to $480,000, and then they settled again out of court for an undisclosed sum. Which gives you mixed feelings about this. Maybe Miss Liebeck shouldn't have been made rich by this, but perhaps she should have gotten less than half of a day's coffee sales from McDonald's for it. The court 100% found this case right by the facts of it. McDonald's was wholly liable. They knew they were liable, and they took no steps to reduce their liability. And even since then, the only step they've really taken is adding extra signage, extra warnings to the heat, which I guess absolves them of any liability. But it kind of shows that they still have their feet kind of dug in the sand on this hot coffee issue. So all in all, we can agree on the court's findings, and maybe even say that she should have made even more money than she did, but that's a topic for another time.